Welcome back to Talk Tickers. Today, we are digging deep into the Q2 2025 earnings call for Indus Towers. They're a giant in India's telecom infrastructure space, and we're here to figure out what their latest results are telling us about what's coming next. Okay, so let's get right into it. On the surface, the company put up some really strong operational numbers. But honestly, the real story here is a huge strategic pivot that pretty much took over the conversation and is absolutely going to define the company's next chapter. First things first, let's just get a quick look at the headline numbers for the quarter. So total revenue clocked in at 81.9 billion rupees. That's a really healthy 9.7% jump year on year, and it was mostly driven by them adding a ton of new towers to their network. Now this is where it gets interesting. Look at that adjusted EBITDA growth. We're talking nearly 15%. This number gives you the real picture of the company's underlying health once you strip out some of the accounting noise. And here is the engine behind all that growth. They added over 4,300 new macro towers in just one quarter. I mean, that is a clear sign that they are just gobbling up market share as their customers build out their networks. So, this is absolutely crucial to understand. You have to look at the difference between the reported numbers and the adjusted ones. See, the reported figures got a little skewed because of a 2.1 billion rupee write-back from a major customer. The adjusted numbers, that's where you see the true core performance. All right, now let's dig into the core Indian business. This thing continues to be an absolute powerhouse, even when it's facing some pretty serious challenges. Operationally, you really can't fault them. They were basically flawless. They continued to take market share and, get this, they delivered a record 99.97% network uptime during one of the worst monsoon seasons in years. That is just incredible execution. And this chart, this right here, shows you the massive tailwind that's pushing them forward. India's 5G subscriber base shot up by 77 million people in a single quarter. That brings the total to over 322 million. That kind of insatiable demand for data is the absolute lifeblood of this business. But, it's not all smooth sailing. While people are adopting 5G like crazy, management did point out that the pace of new tower rollouts has started to slow down a bit. You add that to the pressure on their margins from higher diesel costs, and, well, the picture gets a little more complicated. And that brings us to the central question of the entire call, right? If that initial 5G land grab in India is starting to cool off, where does a massive company like this go for its next big growth spurt? Well, turns out management had a very clear answer. And the answer is Africa. Yup, you heard that right. Indus Towers announced a major expansion into the continent. And look, this wasn't just some small update. This is a fundamental, strategic shift for the entire company. The CEO, Shah, he framed it perfectly. He doesn't see this as just random diversification. He sees it as taking their battle-tested, super efficient operating model and just dropping it into a market that looks a whole lot like India did about a decade ago. So how are they going to do it? Well, the plan is pretty methodical. They're starting in 3 countries, Nigeria, Uganda, and Zambia. And the key here, they've already locked in an anchor customer from day one that really de-risks the whole thing. The goal is simple: build organically, prove the model works, and then hit the accelerator. So here's the bottom line on this move. The opportunity is absolutely massive, but so are the risks. Suddenly, you're talking about things like currency volatility, geopolitical issues, and tough local competition, stuff the company hasn't really had to deal with before. And you can bet the analysts on the call were all over this. Which brings us to the Q&A session. And, wow, it was a good one. It really boiled down to 2 big themes: this new Africa strategy and an old nagging question about when they're going to start returning cash to shareholders. Right, the elephant in the room. Investors have been waiting and waiting for the dividend to come back. It was put on pause because of some financial issues with a big customer, and the market is just itching for some clarity. And management's answer was, well, pretty much what we've heard before. They said the board is still committed to it, but they want to wait until they have total financial clarity. The timeline is still the end of the fiscal year, so no promises, but they're saying the commitment is still there. Of course, analysts really hammered them on the Africa details. How much is this going to cost? What are the expected returns? How are you going to compete? Management was pretty clear it's still early days, but it signals exactly what investors are going to be watching like a hawk. Okay, so let's put all this together. What does it all mean? Here's our take on what to look for from Indus Towers over the next few quarters. We're going to break this down using our standard framework. We'll look at the near-term business outlooks, how we think the stock will react to all this news, and then we'll give you our final rating. So for Q3, we expect more of the same from the core India business, just solid, steady growth. But we think the stock is probably going to be range-bound for a while. It's caught in this tug of war, right, between the promise of a future dividend and the massive execution risk of this new Africa plan. That balance leads us to a market perform rating. Now, for those with a bigger risk appetite, here's a more speculative idea. You could structure a pairs trade, go long on Indus Towers, and short an established pure-play African competitor. What you're really betting on is that Indus's hyper-efficient, Indian-honed operational playbook can outperform the local incumbents, even on their own turf. It's a fascinating wager. And as always, please remember, none of this constitutes financial advice. Always do your own research before making any investment decisions.